So here is a surprise thought. Rishi Sunak is doing some really useful things, but they aren't going to benefit him or the Conservative Party because the country has stopped listening, and he can't make them listen because he's not very good at politics.
We really have turned a corner at the start of this year. We're now pointing in the right direction, and that actually gives me a lot of confidence for the future.
Rishi Sunak is absolutely right when he talks about Britain bouncing back and there being good reason to think that the economy is on the turn. He has logic behind him. Inflation is falling. Interest rates will follow. There will be more money in people's pockets. Business confidence is actually quite high and growing and much stronger than it is on the continent. There is blue sky up there. Now, there's also some slate grey cumulonimbus clouds, and we'll come on to those later. But if you think what I've said so far is surprising, then try this. Rishi Sunak's Conservative government is doing some useful and important things. Now, I'm not paid to list them all, and so I won't. But they would include things like the extension of full business expensing in the budget, which will really boost investment. They include a big tax break for the arts, including the British film and television industries, also in the budget. They include a really welcome £60 million to boost apprenticeship training. They include £245 million to help restock Ukraine's depleted supply of shells. That is really important, urgently needed. They include moves to ensure more local consultation ahead of the extension of low traffic neighbourhoods or Ulez schemes. That is also democratically virtuous. Now, I could go on and on. If I was sitting here surrounded by government press releases, I could probably read you 100 important, useful things the government is doing. None of them earth-shattering, but the kind of important background chuntering, if I can put it that way, that all governments ought to be getting on with. And yet, let's turn to the politics, because absolutely none of this is cutting through. Ministers are really, really busy rushing around the country, announcing things, initiatives of one kind or another, and it's not going to help them, and it's not going to help the Conservative Party one iota. Because at a very deep, profound level, possibly a subliminal level, the people of the country, at a time when we are bouncing back, have concluded that the Conservatives are finished, over, done. And so all that activity I have been describing is, to use a currently popular analogy, a bit like chopping up the carrots for the stew in steerage, or the brushing of the clothes ahead of dinner, or the tuning of violins on board RMS Titanic on that April evening in 1912 when it's heading towards the iceberg. Oh, useful in a certain way, but also profoundly beside the point. The iceberg awaits, and the Prime Minister has revealed that his rendezvous with it will not take place, as many people thought, on May the 2nd.
We have local elections, and there's not going to be a general election on that day.
But it's still there, and they're still heading towards it.
It's November?
It's November.
And all the time, the leadership nonsense goes on. I don't think Penny Mordaunt would make a particularly impressive Prime Minister. She's not very good on the detail, and there's no great track record there.
Stand up and fight.
But I tell you one thing about Penny Mordaunt, she would make quite a good campaigning leader for a short period of time. She is very, very effective in the House of Commons, taking on Labour and Keir Starmer, a great attack dog, if I can put it that way. And, of course, she carries a sword very well. You may remember the 17th century sword of state that she carried at the coronation of King Charles. And it really slightly overexcited many Conservative gentlemen of a certain age whose burgundy-coloured corduroys were quivering with excitement. I think Penny Mordaunt is the kind of Tory leader who could persuade people like that not to go to Reform UK. So you add that, and you add the fact that she's very effective attacking Labour, and you can see why some people are excited about the idea of her replacing Rishi Sunak. But the truth about this is that the plotters in the Commons don't have the numbers. It's all nonsense. It's a bit like a game of cribbage on the upper deck. So who is the person to blame for all of that? Well, I can tell you. It's Rishi Sunak, this diligent, hard-working man who is constantly buried deeper and deeper in the spreadsheets of government, scrabbling away, trying to find the secret of his unpopularity, is no good at politics. What does it mean to say that somebody is no good at politics? Above all, it means that they cannot be heard. In any democracy, the first thing a leader has to do is to be heard, to attract the attention of the people, to get them talking about what he wants them to be talking about in the way that he wants them to be talking. And Rishi Sunak simply cannot be heard. And it's not just the list of relatively minor things I was discussing earlier on. Consider this. Since the autumn, this government has spent £20 billion in personal tax cuts, the two national insurance tax cuts in the autumn statement and then in the March the 6th, the budget.
As Conservatives, we believe that if we bring down the tax burden, that will fire up the economy, create more jobs, more money for public services like the NHS.
Now, I know that, of course, because thresholds have been increased, overall tax burdens are rising. But even so, that is a massive amount of money. And it has had absolutely zip impact on the opinion polls. Quite an achievement. And you might have thought that in the week after the budget, the Conservatives would focus relentlessly on ramming home that message about personal tax cuts. 900 quid in your pocket, more to come, don't trust Labour, all of that. But no. I think incomprehensibly, Rishi Sunak decided to make the following week about his extremism agenda. Well, that went well, didn't it?
We must face down the extremists who would tear us apart. There must be leadership, not pandering or appeasement.
First of all, he had the kind of granite-faced populist Lee Anderson saying things which in many people's views were certainly extremist about the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, and he dithered for so long about taking the whip away and the conditions in which the whip would be handed back, that Lee Anderson eventually got fed up and defected to Reform UK, setting a real ripple of panic on the right of the Conservative Party. And then, of course, he had Frank Hester, the biggest single Tory donor, saying those completely unforgivable racist things about Diane Abbott, wanting her shot and all the rest of it. Now, at that point, I have to say, the extremism agenda itself crawled into a corner and shot itself. It was overdone. What an incredible waste of political capital in 2 really important spring weeks. This is what I mean by being really bad at politics. And more generally, there is real unease in Whitehall about the lethargy and the timidity and the dithering when it comes to big decisions. You hear it on all sides, and it's almost as if the Prime Minister is too scared to take big decisions. And I think in a fundamental way he is. He is terrified of the right of the Conservative Party, always constantly promising another leadership coup or to defect to reform or whatever. And beyond that, he's frightened of the right-wing, populist and sometimes racist instincts of an awful lot of voters in this country.
Who wants the country back? Who wants the country back? Put your hand up. Look, put your hand up. Who wants the country back?
And that is why he is so nervous. Because the truth is that Rishi Sunak himself, he's a Thatcherite in economics. He's pretty right-wing in economics, but he's not a natural Tory right-winger's idea these days of what a Tory right-winger should be like. He is not a culture war warrior in his bones and his blood, and he doesn't do it very well. Again, not good at politics.
This situation has gone on long enough.
Now, I never like to be unfair, and there is a certain amount of rationale behind Rishi Sunak's unease about the right. There was a YouGov poll at the beginning of the year suggesting that Reform UK were on course to destroy the Conservatives' chances in 96 seats and thereby hand Labour a huge majority, even if they won no seats themselves. And the numbers, if you look at Reform UK, they're ticking up very, very slowly all the time. And if Nigel Farage came back, then in the view of a lot of people, that would put them up to sort of 14, 15 points. And that really would be curtains for Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party. In a strange way, Nigel Farage, who is now, of course, a relatively obscure television presenter, has become, again, one of the most important and pivotal figures in British politics.
I'm too sexy for my love. Too sexy for my love. Love's going to leave me.
So more than anything else, this Reform UK threat is what is driving Tory hysteria and leadership speculation bubbling on all the time. But there's one important thing I think that is not made enough of when we talk about Reform UK, which is that its biggest threat is inevitably to those red wall and therefore more Brexiteer, more right-wing, more populist Tory MPs.
It's our job in places like Ashfield to speak up on behalf of the rest of the country.
And if that happened, if they were taken out one by one by Reform rivals at the general election, the end result might be rather paradoxical and possibly even, you might find, amusing, which is that the Conservative Party, which came back as the opposition after that election, far from being right-wing, will be more centrist, more one nation than ever before. And through all of this, poor old Rishi Sunak is having to adjust the entire time to the latest bout of leadership speculation. He can never quite get the agenda because there's always Tories prepared to knock him back off it again. Now, I have to say, we've had a few weeks now of speculation about Penny Mordaunt and people on the right of the party like Kemi Badenoch, and lots of talk of coups and papal conclaves and this and that. But it's particularly ridiculous because this will be the fourth leader of the Conservatives in this Parliament. And I think at that point, the democratic outrage of yet another Prime Minister not elected by anybody would become insupportable. So they would have to go to the country. But at that point, there might not be a single Conservative voter left able to go to the polls because they'd all be laughing so hard. Now, there is a possibility that some Conservative MPs are grabbing onto very tightly that the Rwanda bill, currently being fought through the House of Commons and the House of Lords, will change everything, will be the pivotal moment. Rishi Sunak has always said that he intends to get the first planes off to Rwanda this spring, and it's just possible he'll be able to do that.
I want to get the people on the planes, right? Of course I want to get the people on the planes.
£1,000.
Right, I want to get the people on the planes.
But I am very sceptical as to whether this will be a real political turning point for the Conservatives for a couple of reasons. First of all, the government of Rwanda have made it absolutely clear that they are not interested in taking a lot of people very early. So the first flights will be only a few, maybe a few hundred people in total. Now, given the huge size of the backlog, that is tiny. But secondly, the cost of all of this is beginning to worry everybody. The IPPR, the think tank, suggests it'll be about £230,000 per migrant. The Labour Party says £2 million. So this is a really, really big problem for them. And I think for an awful lot of voters who are concerned about migration generally and about illegal migration particularly, this is going to look too small, too eccentric and too odd to really make the difference. So this then takes us to the May local elections, the next big blow-up in British politics that we expect. The runes for the Tories are really, really grim for this, really, really tough, although it has been said that Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, is in some trouble in the capital. And I'm old enough to remember very vividly myself back in May 1990 when Lord Baker, then Kenneth Baker, the party chairman, managed to spin really poor local election results for Margaret Thatcher by championing the fact that the Tories had held on to Wandsworth and Westminster, a massive, massive triumph, and he got the entire media following him on that. Now, it's possible, just possible, that Rishi Sunak and his people will manage to do the same in regards to London this time round, but for lots of reasons, I really doubt it. Remember, they're not very good at politics. So for how long can this go on? Once authority starts to go, then it happens fast and it happens chaotically. And the mood among Conservatives is really, really bloody at the moment. I was standing in a coffee queue in the House of Commons this week, and I turned round and there was a senior member of the Cabinet standing behind me. And so in my normal friendly fashion, I turned around and said, "Oh, how are you?" And he looked at me, and with this really dark, despairing stare, he said, "How do you think I am?" The mood has never been worse. Now, of course, Rishi Sunak would like to carry on, if he possibly can, until November or even maybe December before the election, by which time, as I say, I think the economy will be improving. I think people will feel a little better off. There'll be a bit more money in their pockets. Those bright blue skies will be a little bit brighter. But it is almost impossible to see how he can hold the party together for that long. In short, I do think, as I said at the beginning, that there is some merit. He is right when he says that Britain is bouncing back. The trouble for him is that the Conservative Party is not bouncing back. I think for them, the iceberg awaits. Thank you very much for watching this. Do let me know what you think. And don't forget, please, to subscribe to the New Statesman's YouTube channel.